Okay, let's turn our attention now to the international papers. Laurent Bersteker joins us today for a look at the headlines. Laurent, let's start, where can we else, with that first US presidential debate in which we saw Donald Trump and Joe Biden repeatedly lock horns.
Well, the general consensus already seems to be that this was one of, if not the worst and most messy debate in U.S. history. Now, let's take a look at some headlines and reactions in the press, starting with The Guardian U.S., which describes the two-hour exchange as a bitterly personal clash, saying both candidates have been ignoring the rules and basically hurling personal insults at each other. Donald Trump repeatedly interrupted Joe Biden as well as the moderator and attacked his rival on his son's Ukraine dealings, among other things. Meanwhile, Biden ended up losing patience, even asking Trump to shut up and calling him a clown, a liar, as well as the worst president in history. Now, the Huffington Post U.S. Sums up the debate's general atmosphere quite nicely with this headline, Round 1, Mayhem, which is really what it felt like at times. Let's go, moving on to the Wall Street Journal now, which also calls it a messy debate with multiple attacks, noting that it was not the calm exchange of policy ideas that the moderators might have hoped for, and rather it devolved into, and I quote, some kind of shouting match, punctuated by repeated pleas by the moderator for the president to stop interrupting.
So what are the papers making of this constant attacks? Do they see it as a spontaneous knee-jerk reaction or a very deliberate tactic?
Well, according to this article by the Washington Post, that was even Trump's entire strategy to tweet out loud for 90 minutes. The author of this article says the debate was one of Trump's last chance to shift public opinion in his favor, but that instead he chose to bluster and bully Joe Biden to prevent him from responding coherently to any of the questions. The article also says that this was partly expected from Donald Trump, but maybe not to that extent, and concludes that, well, Trump's strategy was probably to get viewers to actually turn off the TV.
Ooh, in that context, anybody deciding whether or not one man won this particular debate?
Well, it's a very difficult question, and nobody really seems to have a clear answer, except maybe for the Trump campaign, according to the Huffington Post. Trump supporters received a message clearly stating that Trump had finished debating Joe Biden, a debate that will, and I quote, go down in history, and while asking also for donations. The only problem was that this message was sent out hours before the debate actually began.
Okay, and we are hearing that Biden's U.S. presidential campaign broke its single-hour fundraising shortly after the debate, but I guess we'll have to take a little bit more time to see how the impact of it all happens. So let's move to Lebanon, Laurent, for our next story. The French President Emmanuel Macron on Sunday issuing a scathing attack against all politicians there, accusing them of betraying their country. What has been the reaction to this speech now a few days on?
Well, many Lebanese actually welcomed Macron's attacks and outburst as it pointed to the same issues that they themselves have been denouncing for years. However, others, especially supporters of Hezbollah, which was the main subject of Macron's attacks, were, of course, unhappy. And as we see in L'Orient Le Jour, Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah hit back at Emmanuel Macron yesterday, calling on the French president to change his tone, which he described as condescending, and even accusing Macron of seeking a new form of French tutelage or mandate over Lebanon. However, the paper does note that Nasrallah looked somewhat calm and less angry than expected during this interview. And he did say that he welcomes the French initiative in Lebanon to form a new government as soon as possible and to lead those important reforms that Macron had talked about.
Back here in France, the government has announced several measures aimed at protecting wild animals, especially those in captivity. It's causing some controversy, though.
Well, the government had been accused of not doing enough for animal protection and the animal cause in general, and it hit back in a way with this new measure, which Libération headlines on today, with this picture of an orca and the caption "Saving Willy," which is a reference to the movie. But it does leave a question mark at the end of that headline. And according to the paper, the law which seeks to gradually ban circuses from using wild animals is a far cry from some of the measures that many animal rights and environmental activists had been calling for. For instance, addressing the issues of hunting in France, which is a major issue, as well as intensive livestock farming. According to the author, this could be even a way by the government to divert attention away from these very important issues.
Okay, let's stay on the theme of animal welfare, but a very different story. You found one about a group of rowdy parrots who have had to be separated.
Well, that's right, and that's what staff at the Lincolnshire Zoo seemed to think after a group of 5 African grey parrots began insulting passerbys and apparently encouraging each other to do so. Now, their names, Billy, Elsie, Eric, Jade, and Tyson, have been telling people where to go, and we're clearly having a bad influence on each other, according to the zookeepers. Now, despite having received only one complaint and a lot of laughs from these parrots, the zoo did decide to separate them for the sake, and I quote, of the younger visitors.
Yeah, I would have thought they would actually attract more visitors than turn them away, but there you go. Laurent, thanks a lot for that look at the international papers. Of course, we'll be back in 2 hours' time with another update on that, notably perhaps the reactions there to that US debate.